Hello, my name is Deborah Hurd. I am the project coordinator for the Department of Black Studies 50th anniversary here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and I'd like to welcome you to this virtual event. Today's panel is hosted by UNO Chris Libraries, Archives and Special Collections, the Department of Black Studies partner in the Charting Our Path 50 Years of Black Studies initiative. Let me begin with a message from today's sponsor. This program is brought to you by Humanities Nebraska, a statewide nonprofit organization inspiring and enriching personal and public life by offering opportunities to thoughtfully engage with history and culture with additional funding from the Nebraska Cultural Endowment. If you enjoy this type of programming, please consider supporting Humanities Nebraska with a contribution. Donations are matched by state and federal funds. Your support helps preserve our past and inform our future. Throughout this year, we have sought to provide programming that demonstrates the immense range of knowledge and critical study that the discipline of Black Studies now encompasses. But in the spirit of Sankofa, the Akan word that means to go back and fetch it, to return to the source, we look back at the movements that gave rise to the demands that created this space, for without them, this department would not exist. The first Department of Black Studies was established in 1968 at San Francisco State University, following several years of protests and demands by Black students for a course of study that reflected the cultural and social understandings of Black people globally and historically, but which also provided an academic focus for improving the lives of those same people. Such was the mindset of Black students all over this country. And as their roles changed from marchers and participants to being at the forefront of liberation movements, they began making their own demands. Black students at UNO began making their own demands of an administration that they found to be unresponsive to the racial discrimination that they faced on this campus. After repeatedly being disregarded, on November 10th, 1969, 54 Black UNO students took the protest straight to the president's office and sat in for his failure to address the issues of racial discrimination and cultural relevance on this campus. The police were called and all 54 students were arrested. The arrest of the Omaha 54 was a key historical moment for this university and this city because it gave the student population and Omaha's Black community a cause to rally around. Omaha's Black civic and social organizations and churches came together to bail out all of the Omaha 54 students, as well as stand behind them in their negotiations with the university. One of their demands was the creation of a Department of Black Studies. And 2 years later, as a result of their continued demands and pressure on the university's administration, this department came into existence in the fall of 1971. And it stands today as one of the oldest Black Studies departments in this country and one of the very few in the entire Great Plains region. 50 years strong, this department is looking back from where it has come, looking ahead to the new paths that the discipline of Black Studies has created, and looking around for ways to be of service to the community. It is because of the courage of 54 students that this department exists. And it is because of the unwavering support of Omaha's Black community then and now that this department continues to exist. We salute you and we thank you. Born of struggle and refined in the fires of oppression, Black Studies is a discipline that from its very beginning has been called upon to study, analyze, and critique the continuing effects of historical enslavement, colonization, land dispossession, and corporate imperialism. On that basis, we must stop to acknowledge that this university and the very city itself sits upon the sacred tribal lands of the Native American people for whom this city is named, the Omaha, and that of other First Nation people who regarded this land as their communal homeland. We stand in solidarity with you. So today we turn to look at the effects of the legacy of the Omaha 54. So today we have four graduates from UNO who either majored or minored in Black Studies, And we're going to talk to them and have a conversation about the impact that studying Black studies had on them and their lives. So our panelists are Mr. John Ewing. Mr. Ewing earned a BS in Business Administration and Criminal Justice and was a minor in Black Studies in 1984. He earned a master's degree in Urban Studies in 1985, both from UNO. And Mr. Ewing is the current Douglas County Treasurer and also an Associate Minister of Salem Baptist Church. Ms. Felicia Dailey earned her BA degree in Communications, and she was also a minor in Black Studies in 2009. Mrs. Dailey currently works at ConAgra, but she has the added advantage of having been the administrator for the Department of Black Studies from 2001 to 2014. So she can provide us with special insight about the department. Next, we have Mr. Mandla Stelly. Mr. Stelly earned a BA degree in Black Studies in 2017, a Master in Education in 2019 from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and he's currently pursuing a doctorate degree in Educational Leadership from Concordia University in St. Paul. And finally, we have I said her degree is so new that it still the ink isn't even dry from it. But Ms. Kaia Phelps, she earned her BS degree in Black Studies and Criminal Justice in 2021. And she is currently completing her first year of law school at Creighton. So I'd like to thank all four of you for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to have all of you here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So we're just going to go with a number of questions that I prepared for you, and you can jump in at any time. Anytime the spirit moves you, something is you just have a burning question, or you just really want to respond to one of these questions, you have an interesting story, just jump right in. But the first question that I want to pose to each of you is, where did you go to school before you came to UNO? Because I think that some of the things that a Black Studies department can offer differs based on the experiences you had growing up, either in coming through high school or experiences you had in elementary or junior high school. So could you just give us some of the background of where you were, how you came up before you came to UNO?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start then. I am a lifelong Omaha resident. I attended Lothrop Elementary School, which was predominantly African-American, probably about 98 or 99% African-American during the time I went there. I then attended Horseman Junior High School, which is now King Science Center. Horseman was also predominantly African-American, probably close to the same percentage, 98, 99%. Then the year I started high school was the first year of busing here in Omaha. So I was thinking about attending Omaha Technical High School, which is no longer in existence. And my geography teacher said, no, you need to go to Northwest High School. So I went to Northwest High School, sight unseen, didn't even know it existed until he suggested that. And the first day I saw it was the first day of football practice. And Northwest was pretty diverse setting. The first time in my life that I had been, other than the teachers that I had been around, a large number of Caucasians in any setting. So it was an eye-opening experience, but I think it helped me grow as an individual. So I'll stop there and talk more about why I was in Black Studies and all those things later.
Ms. Dailey, we can't hear you.
I'm a native of Omaha also. I was experienced my K through 12 education in Omaha Public Schools. I attended Lothrop School as Mr. Ewing has, a great school populated in the middle of our Black community in Omaha, 98% Blacks when I was there too. And then I was fortunate, but maybe unfortunate to be bused, part of the Omaha Public School busing that they implemented. So I was bused from 4th through 8th grade out west, where I was the only Black student in my classroom. So I went from being a classroom of all Blacks to being the only Black. So then I went to North High School, but I did graduate from Omaha Flanagan. So that's my educational career for Omaha.
I guess I can jump in. Um, Born and raised North Omaha under the tutelage of the great Matthew Stelly, rest in peace, pops in the ancestral realm, and also my mother in Ntombi Kaise, Babindisa, who is South African. I came through the ranks. I went through, let's see, I went to King primary for second and third grade. Um, then we had the busing situation. We went to Field Club from North Omaha. That's a South Omaha school. Most of everybody in my neighborhood went to that school or either Washington. So that was fourth to sixth grade. Then middle school went to Monroe and high school went to Benson. And it wouldn't be until about maybe roughly 13, 14 years later where I go to Metro Community College and then transfer to Miss Kaia.
Well, like all of y'all, I actually went to Lothrop too. So I went to Lothrop and then I went to King like Mr. Ewing, but mine was a little topsy-turvy. I'm not gonna say that I was a problem child, but I was kind of a problem child. So I went to Lothrop, then I went to Fullerton, which is an out west school. And then I went back to King, or excuse me, I went to Buffett and then I went to King. So just to make sure that I was staying on the right track and make sure that I'm getting the right influences and paying attention in school. I ended up at North High School for all through 9th to 12th grade, and I graduated from North High and then on to UNO. And that was probably the worst culture shock I've ever had. So in a good way. My biggest culture shock came from UNO, even though I was in predominantly white schools in both middle school and in both elementary school. UNO was probably my biggest culture shock still to this day. My first one, my second one is Creighton. Creighton got nothing on UNO. So.
Okay, you need to explain that culture shock coming to UNO though.
Sure, so when I came to UNO, I had more of a hunger to know who I was as an African-American person. When I was younger, it more so came from a sense of knowing that I was different from my white counterparts, but it was a little bit childish in that I just assumed that they were better, smarter than me because most of them lived out west and they lived closer to the school. And both of those schools, Fullerton and Buffett, were in nice neighborhoods. So I just thought inherently, you're better than me, you're smarter than me. I don't know much than you do. But I know that that's not true, especially when I got to high school, that wasn't the case. And I wasn't raised like that. I don't know, but it just, culture kind of tells you how you should think and how you should perceive yourself. So that's how I perceive myself. But when I got to high school, I knew that wasn't the case. I was always magna summa cum laude. So my mental assertions weren't really even lining up with, you know, my actions, the grades that were on paper. But what I mean by UNO being a culture shock is I was probably maybe 2, like out of 60 kids who would be in a class. And that's a pretty small class size, or excuse me, that's bigger class size for UNO. The typical is like 20, 30. And I would be the only Black person, but it would become evident that I'm the only Black person when a teacher would say something flip, because I'm just that student that will stand up and be like, yeah, no, you didn't convey that right. You need to make sure that you say what you mean and you mean what you say. And I quickly became that not loud Black girl, but the one who would stand up and who would ask questions and that sort of thing.
All right, so kind of following up on what you just mentioned, Kaia. Did you have any experience studying Black history or culture before college?
No, just to keep that answer simple. No, I hadn't. No, I did not. I didn't really have any. I did not hear about the word. The word diaspora did not come into my vocabulary until I came into college.
Ms. Dailey, we can't hear you again.
Coming from Lothrop School, my experience was that I only saw Black. I saw Black teachers. Our Mr. Taylor was there. Miss Pruitt was there, our secretary. Mrs. Graham was a kindergarten teacher. She was white, but she was culturally aware because she was teaching so many Black students. So I came out of Lothrop with a pride to be Black because that's all I saw. And it was a neighborhood. So when I went to school, I went to Christ Child, where everybody went to the after school program. We were across the street from Paradise Church. So my Blackness started at a very young age because that's all I knew. I wasn't around a lot of Black white people. So I just had a prideness about myself because I think it was my surroundings. And when that's all we saw, I just always had expectations that we were highly educated. We were accomplished people because of, I think, that Lothrop School foundation that I had by being around Mr. Taylor and Mrs. Pruitt and Mrs. Johnson that lived on Pinckney Street.
I'd like to jump in on that really quickly because that's the experience I had at Lothrop Elementary School as well. Mr. Taylor and that staff was amazing. And I met some people who are still lifelong friends there. Mr. Taylor, when I ran for Congress in 2012, was actually part of my campaign. So that was an extremely proud moment for me to remember all the way back to Lothrop Elementary School. And then at Horseman, we had Mr. Barbie. And so we just had schools that really were culturally sensitive, I thought, at that time, and then also encouraged us to seek excellence and have a sense of pride, as Felicia said. That's one thing I took away from there, even when I went to Northwest High School.
I'll just jump in real quick, kind of piggybacking off this theme of pride. One thing, I love where I'm from, North Omaha bound, and it made me who I am today. And this sense of pride. When I was coming up in school, from King Primary all the way up to Benton, it was just people from my neighborhood. Like a lot of people spent the night over my mama's house, or I spent the night over their mother's house, and it was just, this is our community. So yeah, I appreciate y'all talking about pride in this context for sure.
And I think just listening to the stories, it becomes very evident that something happened during the time when people started busing to the neighborhood schools. The people that you had that were there because of segregation, you had people that were highly qualified, but they couldn't be in other spaces. So they were there in those neighborhood schools, teaching, giving that high degree of information and knowledge that they had, passing that on, but also passing on the pride that they had. But when students started being bused, then they were taken away from those areas and those spaces that were safe and nurturing for our children. and put into spaces that were not so nurturing. And there was not the same degree of care. So I could hear that just from the conversations that you all are having. That was one of the things that really hurt, I think, our communities, was that forced busing, but also integration took a lot of our very good teachers out of our neighborhood schools.
If you don't mind, Professor Hurd, I would like to say something.
Mhm.
I'm the youngest out of this panel,
Mhm.
and it's become clear to me that I didn't really have a sense of pride growing up. I am very much an anomaly here. And even when I talk to my friends who have children and who want to put their children into the education system, they never say that they want to put their children in the neighborhood that they grew up in or the school that they came from. I don't have friends who are just zealously waiting to put their child in Lothrop, who are zealously waiting to put their child in King or North, because we live in a digital age. I grew up in a digital age. I'm a 98 baby, but my time was in that 2000s. So it's very much geared towards we need more access and becoming aware of the disparity between the education that's offered at Lothrop and the education that might be offered at Fullerton. Even though I'm not saying that it's grossly different, but in terms of access and resources, there are some differences. But that's not to say that one is better than the other, but that's the narrative. And so my parents instilled in me a very strong sense of self. But when you grow up around a culture that tells you this school is better because it's out here or the homes out here are better, you just inherently, at least for me, I can't really speak for anybody else, but as a child hearing that, you just inherently believe that the school system is better too. So mom, I want to go out, I want to go to school out there. I don't want to go to school where daddy went to school, because my dad went to Horseman as well. We grew up right there on Laird. So I grew up in a community. I played with African-American children. I had my sense of Blackness, but it was more so at home. I code switched at 10, whereas people who are in their 30s or in their late 20s, they don't know, it's not that they don't know anything about it, but they probably didn't have to do it that young. It's like, it's more of an awareness that you have to operate in a certain way when you're in certain spaces. You coming out of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, there is going to be more of that awareness. That Black pride is different coming up now.
So since you still have your, well, you just muted, but you were unmuted at the time, Kaia. So let me start with you again. What was your experience coming to UNO? Did you find it to be a welcoming place or not?
I didn't find UNO welcoming at all.
Okay.
UNO was not, I love the Black Studies department. The Black Studies department was the most welcoming department that I could ever come in. I'm not going to turn this into a negative. It's not negative at all, because I found a sense of, because where the aggregate seemed to ostracize me, I found community in the Black Studies department. I came in to UNO just with the criminal justice degree. And for me, that was a means to an end. I've always wanted to be an attorney. I never really wanted, if I could be an attorney, go to law school and skip college, I would have, because it was just a means to an end for me. Black Studies is what made the experience worthwhile, because I met some lifelong, whom I consider to be friends, but because they're twice my senior, I always refer to them as ma'am, as Mrs. I know Dr. Robinson can't stand that, but I've been calling her that ever since I've met her, and I just love her. And that's just, that's the community that I have in the Black Studies department, and I don't take it for granted. So when I didn't get the score that I didn't want, that I didn't desire for the LSAT, then I was like, you know what? I love the community at UNO, i.e. the Black Studies department. So I'm gonna just stay for another year, and Buffett paid for 5 years. So I tagged that on and I put a Black Studies degree on it because I came to love it. I was always in the department. The professors were the ones that I clung to the most, even yourself. And I only knew you for that 5th year. But it was a very, very good experience for me in that department. Now, outside there, you're gonna meet some characters. And I think that's because there is a social awareness or awakening with Black people. And there are some things that we want to talk about, especially those terms of art like microaggressions, macroaggressions, things that perhaps are not really so thrown around in the working environment until somebody who is younger comes into it. You know what I mean? There's different things that jobs want you to do now to be culturally aware, the cultural bias training. That stuff is new to a certain extent, but yeah.
So Kaia said a number of things that resonated with me. So I'll jump in and talk about my time at UNO and how I ended up with a minor in Black Studies. I was a business major. I was there for a means to an end to get a job. And UNO was great because I had a lot of friends that were coming into UNO at the same time I was. So I had a social network. The classroom, however, as a business major was completely different because I was usually the only or one of 2 or 3 African Americans, especially if it was a class that was somewhat difficult like accounting. So it wasn't welcoming from that perspective because of the lack of diversity and the lack of support in the classroom. About halfway through my degree, I took the opportunity to join the Omaha Police Department. And I tell people a lot of times, put your money where your mouth is. I came back to UNO after being on the police department for about a year because I wanted to have a stronger foundation as an African-American man, because police departments historically have had problems with policing in African-American communities. And I was bold enough to think that we could change the Omaha Police Department and make it better. It's not perfect, never will be, but I can assure you that the police department is better today in 2022 than it was March 1st of 1982 when I joined. But in order to do that, I felt like I had to have that foundation. So I was paying for my college when I came back. And I looked for a way to get my business degree that I was working on, plus criminal justice. And then I had the opportunity to choose my minors. So I chose Black Studies very intentionally because I wanted to know the history of our people, as well as the history in Omaha, as well as some of the issues with policing and all of those types of things, and really look at how can I be accountable to the community I grew up in. And so that's still my motivation today. And I think we made that organization better. And I'm still working to make it better through the Empowerment Network and some of the other things that I'm involved in, because I believe that everyone, regardless of where they're at, where they live, what their zip code is entitled to what I call good policing. So I tell people I'm not anti-police and I'm not pro-police. I believe labels are too easy. What I am is in favor of good policing, holding the police department accountable, and policing with the community, not doing policing to the community. And so that's what I was able to do, partly because of that foundation of understanding my history. So it was probably one of the best decisions I made from an educational standpoint. Very quickly, I'm going to just put this out here because my wife and I talked about this last night. We have a Maverick leadership scholarship that we've been providing to criminal justice majors who were in the Goodrich program. And we were talking about expanding that. And so what we are going to do, hopefully by the fall, is we are going to put our money where our mouth is again. And we're going to offer 2 $1,000 scholarships to people who are majoring in Black studies or getting a minor in Black studies, because the program was instrumental in the success that I've had over the last 40 years. So we made that decision last night. So thank you again for having me on this panel and making me think.
I will say thank you for Dr. Robinson. I know she's screaming on the other end. We just see the exclamation points, but she's screaming behind the screen.
It really is our honor. You know, we've tried to give back, and this is just one more way for us to give back to an institution that has helped us and allowed us to be able to help people in this community.
Well, I have a funny story to start off. First, this is in dedication to Matthew Stelly. I started off at UNO in graduate studies. My first 2 weeks there, Matthew Stelly walks in and says, "Who do you know?" And I said, "Pardon me? You're the first Black girl ever in graduate studies. You know somebody." I don't know it. I don't know you or anybody here other than who hired me. And so that was my first initiation of Matthew Stelly. Then I found out from Dean Hendricks, this is the Dean of Graduate Studies, Shelton Hendricks, that said, "That's Matthew Stelly, Felicia. You need to get to know him." So I'm saying that all to say that Matthew Stelly's presence on UNO campus was respected, mainly because of his commitment to Black studies. Again, the Dean of Graduate Studies told me Matthew was someone I needed to know. So moving forward into my career at UNO, after I left graduate studies, I went to Black studies, where I was the administrative assistant, and I was around professors with PhDs, professors pursuing their PhD. So I felt that I must get a degree at UNO and in Black studies, because my issue and my commitment to students was, when you walk in that door, we're going to service you. Whatever you need, Black studies will provide you so that you can be able to navigate, as Ms. Phelps explained, on this campus. That's not welcoming to us, but we're here. So back then it was the chair, Dr. Robert Chrisman, and he trained me to know that, Felicia, this is graduating from college is the easy part. Navigating on this campus is what's difficult. And so that was a responsibility that I took upon myself as the admin in Black studies. And that's why I pursued a minor in Black studies and a major in communications, because it's important to be able to communicate not only to our Black students, but to those outside that door when we leave, because that's the world we exist in. So it's a twofold, because professors are challenged. The experience you have, Ms. Phelps, is not just in the classroom. That's what professors experience when they're going to the higher administrators on campus. They're challenged just as much as the students are. So to make a long story short, that's why I majored in Black studies, was part of because I was in that department. And when you're around that type of excellence, you want to participate in those water cooler conversations from a deconstructive and from an experience and from an educational background too.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Your insights are, wow, this is a good panel. Thank everybody for sharing. I guess for me, just because of my pedigree and my caliber, my mama being from South Africa, born August of '53, apartheid, and where you'd go to jail if you had the autobiography of Malcolm X's book, living through that was my mom's. And then my pops, born and raised, well, he's from from Omaha, raised in California during the height of the Black Power movement. And for them to meet at UNO, get married at UNO, and have me, number one, the first child. So it's always been embedded in me. Like I learned how to read when I was 3 because pops will be always reading. I have newspapers everywhere, files everywhere. So, you know, a 2, 3 year old's just gonna pick up on that. So um that's the influence coming from pops. And then my mom's just automatic with, you know, the South African history. You know, this is just what me and my little brother were embedded in. But it wouldn't be until I was 31 years old where I decided to go back to school. And it was a conversation I had with my dad. Uh, and I was in sales and marketing for about 10 or 15 years. And just the grime of like getting people over the phone and it became a moral question. Like, this isn't me. You know, I'm kind of bigger than this. And, you know, a lot of things that was going on at that time. But I decided to go back to school. So I talked to Pops. Pops was like, blood, you might as well just go to UNO and go get you a Black Studies degree. And it was just like an epiphany came of like, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. You know, kind of similar to how Dr. Robinson did motivate me to get this doctorate, her and my mom's. But that was the start. I had to go to Metro because it's been a while since I've been in school. So did that, graduated with honors, and switched to UNO. That's where I was with Jay Rogers, who brought intro. I got that intro from Black Studies from Jay Rogers. And that class right there just was like, yeah, okay. Now, and it just made sense to me. Yeah, I'm gonna go. I want a degree in Black Studies. I don't think nothing else even matters just because of the way I was groomed and my pedigree and my caliber. Like, yeah, I'm about to do that and I'm about to soak it all up, you know, just from this academic perspective, because personally, I'm wired like that. But yeah, man, and then leaving Metro, going to UNO, yeah. As a whole, no, I didn't feel welcomed at all. And then I'm a non-traditional student, so at that time I got to UNO. What was I, 33? That was 2015, 23. Yeah, I was 33. One of my friends passed away that year. Yep, 33. So walking around the campus, I see, you know, the little youngsters, you know, they do their thing. I'm just there on a mission. I'm here to get this degree and I'm out. But then it'd be like, shouts out to Dr. Robinson, shouts out to James Freeman, you know, they brought me in, you know, and that was a cool little spot. You know, that's where I met Kaia. Me and Kaia be chopping it up about all type of stuff, you know, goofing around with each other, but you know, and all of that. So like, you know, shouts out to the Multicultural Affairs Department, Black Studies for sure, but that'd be our spot. This is our space. And you know, good conversations and just beautiful people. You know what I mean? That was embedded in me. Like my dad had a lot to do with the Black Studies Department at UNO, and just it was just automatic. Like I didn't necessarily know I was destined to be this way, but I guess it was because I was doing my own thing for a long time. But then something just hit me, and I had to go back to school. So, yeah, Black Studies Department. Hey, that's where the magic happens, right?
So my next question to you all, and I want to start this time with Mr. Ewing, and because he would be closer to, I mean, he's still 15 years from the founding, but still closer to what it was towards the beginning. But what was the department like when you all were coming through? The faculty, the staff, and other students, what was that like?
I think the faculty, the staff, they were excellent. The course offerings and the learning was amazing. The support for Black Studies from a campus perspective, and even looking at it really respectfully in terms of getting a degree or minor in Black Studies was not there. There was no real encouragement or support for the program. Even where the department was housed was substandard. So it really was about the excellent professors. I'll name a couple guys that I remember: Dr. Secret, Dr. Alonzo Smith. Those guys were amazing professors and committed to our education and helping us to develop that sense of pride and understand that excellence should be what we strive for. And so they were very inspiring to me. And even when times got tough, when you don't get promoted like you think you should and all of that, I persevered anyway because of that foundation. And very proud of, like I said, what we've done to try to make that place better for the citizens of Omaha. Because if we have a department that's doing policing with a community, then it's no longer an occupying army, which a lot of police departments were at that time, and some still are. So I absolutely loved it, but there was not the support that I see today. If it had turned 50 years old back when I was in school, there would be no year-long celebration. Oh, someone typed Dr. Garrison. And so thank you for doing that. He was another inspiration as well. So great staff, no support.
Right. Just to piggyback on that, Mr. Ewing, too, the chairs have always been vital to the progress of the department. The chairs are the spearheads of the recruitment and the hiring. So when I started, they were embarking on their 30th year, I believe, and Dr. Chrisman started the Malcolm X Festival, which is now still celebrated today. And his goal was to bring community research and a historical perspective from all over the world to the campus. And so I was privileged to be his admin assistant with the first year. We reached out to individuals in the community again. I believe Mr. Ewing have came to our department to speak and was invited. We would work with the police department. We would work with the Malcolm X Foundation. We worked with the Nebraska Humanities and secured one of the first grants for the department because Dr. Chrisman's model was he wanted the university to support it, but he also wanted to sustain it. And he was very much about putting in writing what their commitment was. So I can't neglect without speaking of Dr. Nancy Belk, because she was instrumental in putting in writing that the university was committed to Black studies, that they were not going to close it back when I was starting, because it's always that fear of, oh my goodness, they're gonna stop the funding. The state isn't gonna support it. And so every chair would embark on that issue of how long-standing is it really? And is the university behind it? So I have to applaud Dr. Nancy Belk, back then the chancellor, that was really committed to working with the community. She had an African American advisory board that she relied on heavily, and she was committed to the Black Studies department along with Dr. Chrisman. So I was privileged to work with Dr. Chrisman, Dr. Bro, who came from from Dartmouth, Dr. Dorian Crosby, one of the first tenure track females in the Department of Black Studies was Dr. Dorian Crosby. Cynthia, as a student, when she was studying Black Studies. I could go on and on with all the chairs, but I have to say that the chairs it's a revolving position. So as an admin assistant, you could get a different boss every 3 years. I think Cynthia may be the 6th chair maybe, but it's something that the fight is constant. The fight is constant as the chair because they always are fighting to legitimize and to sustain the presence of Black studies. And John Ewing is correct. Where they came from and where they are now is it's apples and oranges. It's totally different. The fact that they have a dedicated suite with dedicated faculties with a lab in the back, those are all things that was unheard of before. So I just applaud it, and I'm just glad that they're celebrating 50 years. This is great.
And just to jump in, shouts out to all my Black Studies fam. And then I'm just touch upon admin assistants and Janet Ashley. Mm, 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 mm. Sometimes them days be a little bit difficult.
Talk about an anointing. I had to jump in on that.
But you go into that Black Studies department and Miss Ashley there, hey, one you got a conversation with and just everything, we talk about just anything with Miss Ashley, academics, real life. And, it's this kind of climate, this collectivism that's in that department, that I've been fortunate enough to go through from 2015 to 2018. Just, I think about Janet Ashley, man, and just all the, shouts out to everybody, because we got a beautiful situation, but as Miss Felicia was just talking, I just thought about Janet Ashley. So shouts out to Janet Ashley.
Oh, I gotta speak on Miss Ashley. You done it now. You done it now. Miss Ashley was one of the individuals who really showed me how to pick and choose my battles. Because being on UNO's campus, there's a lot of them. And you can choose to fight all of them, but you're going to have a terrible time. Or you can fight them. She had this thing she used to say to me, should it be said? Should it be said by me? Should it be said at this time? And that always gave me peace in my spirit when I feel like somebody said something that was so inflammatory or so wrong that I got to speak on this. I have to say something. Let's march. Let's do something because they just made me mad. We got to do something. And she told me that the fighting not only comes with you just graduating, because I remember somebody saying that's the easy part. It comes with learning how to actually navigate in that space, because that's going to not necessarily hurt them more, but that's more of a statement or a protest than you actually saying or doing something to them. And so it just resonated with me. And her and Dr. Imani, he was also very, I know he's still with the department today, but was one of those individuals who was always saying words of wisdom and would always come in with something that was so integral to the moment or so pivotal to the moment that would just hit you upside the head. So Dr. Imani and Miss Janet Ashley, I never forget them. They're actually the ones who encouraged me to do the commencement speech. I wouldn't have done the 2021 commencement speech had it not been for Miss Ashley, Dr. Robinson, and Dr. Imani encouraging me to go do that, because that was one of the hardest things I ever did. Just a little quick story. What brought me into the Black Studies department is because I walked out of a speech. I mean, I did not prepare for it. Dr. Robinson knows. I did not prepare for this speech. I wasn't ready for it. And the day before, I had been introduced to Miss Ashley. And I walked out of that class and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And then Dr. Robinson said, go back. That's what you do. Go back. And so I went back, swallowed my pride, redid that speech the next day and got an A on it. And I went from that to being a commencement speaker. And that's not only because of the grace of God, that big part. It was also the people he put in my life, like Miss Ashley, like Dr. Robinson, like Dr. Imani, to say, I don't care what you think about you. I see something in you that you can't see right now. And the people in the Black Studies department are good for that. They're good for saying things like that. I see something in you that you either can't see, don't want to see, or you're ignoring. And I'm gonna need for you to let me foster that. And for those 5 years that I was there, it was just culminating, just being birthed. And I was being pregnant with it. And eventually became the commencement speaker, the same girl that ran out of class that day.
So let me follow up with you all on this, because it is very telling that all of you have talked about things beyond academics that you got from Black Studies. So considering that the Black Studies department provides all of this extra academic support, it becomes a very troubling question why there's always a need or this attack on the department. Why do you think that with the department providing all of this academic support, first of all, but then all of this other support for students, that it's always in this position of having to try to maintain, try to protect itself, try to maintain its existence? Why is that? We can't hear you, Ms. Dailey.
The power is in us, the knowledge is known. And so again, it's kind of like, we continue to have diversity and inclusions, but the facts are there, but we still have the committees and the individual positions that are in place. I think that Black Studies is more of an area that the more we know, the more powerful we are. I think that the fact that there is a Black Studies in Nebraska, and it's a little known secret, but it's not known, is evident on the power of Black Studies. Because once you have it, you're going to use it the rest of your life. No matter where I go, everything I do consists of Blackness. I'm an Eastern Star because we give scholarships to Black students. I work at ConAgra, and I'm committed to improving and increasing our internship population with our Black community. When I was hired, that's something that I expressed to my boss. That's my passion. That's what I'm interested in. And so once you have that knowledge from Black Studies and a student has it, such as myself, such as Ms. Phelps, this is Mr. Ewing, we're going to use that the rest of our life. And they know that to be true. And so it's powerful. And so I think the knowledge is there. Others know it. We just have to continue teaching it and spreading it so that we can continue doing the good work that we're all doing.
Years ago, when I was part of the program, I don't think people really saw the academic value at all. What they are starting to see is not only the academic value, but they're also starting to see the value that is created when you have a welcoming place for African-American students, and when you have an opportunity for others, quite honestly, to learn about African-American history. African-American history is part of American history. It's not separate. And what they wanted to do was keep it separate. And the only way you could learn it was in a Black Studies program of some type back in the 1970s and the 1980s. And then last thing I'll say about it is I truly learned some things that have impacted my life forever. And one of them is even in the political arena. No one had ever won a countywide election. So there was no reason that I should think I could do that as an African-American in Nebraska. But because of those lessons from Dr. Secret in particular, because he was also in political science, and understanding that process, remembering all the things I learned almost at that time, 25 years prior, I took a lot of those lessons into that campaign. And so there are lifelong lessons to be learned when you have that kind of supportive, nurturing environment, not to mention this simple thought process, paying it forward once you've had your success, I tell people success is not enough. What you want to do is move from success to significance. And the only way you move from success to significance is if you're bringing other people along and investing in other people. And those are the things you learn in that program that isn't necessarily academic, but it's a value that makes you a better human being.
I would just say it goes back to a theme we say in the department: know your history, know your greatness. And for me as an educator, I teach 8th grade social studies. We call it global studies in Minnesota. Know your history, know your greatness. So, of course, they're going to aim at Black study. They always have ever since its inception. Um, we all know this as Black study scholars. And they're going to continue to aim at it. Why? It's kind of like what you outlined, Mr. Ewing, as far as um, this is where we get the knowledge. This is where we find out our truths. Like with even my college students that I teach every summer, I wish I would have knew this in 4th grade. I wish I would have knew this in 6th grade. That's part of my dissertation, is bringing Black studies classes to the secondary school level. Like if we all understand this, and I mean, irregardless of what do, as far as what I've learned and what I know, I mean, the original human was made in this prototype. This is the prototypical human being. It starts there. If our babies understand that, no, we're not just coming from slaves. You come from kings, queens, and you're the original human prototype. And we all have common ancestors. Everything does come from us. I mean, just that understanding right there, I think is just like so life changing for future generations to come. This mentality and how they did us with this past century, a lot of decades, our people just think that we're slaves. You have a slave mentality, then, that's a wrap. But I'm trying to teach these babies that we are great kings and queens and you are the original human. And then once you understand that, now take that from there and do your thing.
That question reminds me of something that I went through in high school, where a teacher, when I graduated high school, I graduated with 14 scholarships under my belt. And every time I would go into the guidance counselor office to get a paper, the woman who was sitting at the station would look at me, and I never understood the look. But I remember going to my mentor. His name was Christopher Wiley. He's passed on. And he was the first African-American response counselor. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional when I talk about my Wiley, because that was a good man. But he was like, because I was telling him I'm sick of this, I don't like school, blah, blah, blah. And he was telling me, no, you got to keep going because people don't want to see you progress past this. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, that woman out there, the reason why she keeps staring at you is because she wants to know how in the world you keep getting all these scholarships. And so I say that to say, sometimes when you get permission to do something, like the Black Studies, like not necessarily permission, but when you're allowed to do something, rather, sometimes that same entity that allowed it tries to say how far it can go. And so that's how I felt in my academic career. You gave it to me, now you're trying to decide how far I can go. But what they don't understand, that it is power unlimited. When it's on a firm foundation, you can't do anything to stop it. I'm a spiritual person. I can't do anything for the people. You know what I mean? I always come from a spiritual standpoint. Because God is my foundation, you cannot stop this. Every person that I've ever encountered in the Black Studies department had some kind of spiritual upbringing about themselves. And they've always based the way that they came at students, the way that they came at administration from a calm, cool, collected level. And I say that because they were being strategic. You can't just always directly fight the person who's directly fighting you. You have to be strategic, and you have to make sure that you're making the right moves. This is a chess game. And if you don't go with the chess game, not saying that you have to dial yourself down, but more so, if you don't move the right piece at the right time, you're going to lose the game. But going back to that firm foundation, if that foundation is firm, you can't shake it. So I think the reason why the Black Studies Department gets attacked so much is because nobody expected it to be this fostering, to be this helpful, to be this productive. You know a tree by its fruit. It's been producing so much fruit that you can't believe it's kind of coming out of nowhere. And so, not to switch institutions, but coming from the Creighton perspective, when we talk about anything Blackness, it's almost like, okay, well, we have to make that synonymous with inclusivity. And okay, I see your point, but inclusivity and Blackness are two different things. We cannot let's stop making this synonymous. Like, if we want to talk about Black, let's talk about Black. If we want to talk about gender, let's talk about gender. If we want to talk about, I understand that there's some cross-cultural, I understand that. I'm just saying at the end of the day, I think that sometimes our voice gets overshadowed under the umbrella of inclusivity. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. We should have our voice heard. Everybody, every group individually deserves to have their own voice heard. Do not overshadow it under an umbrella. Let's talk about the issues that are very specific to our community and why it hurts and why it impacts us, so that we can make a difference, each one reach one for the next person coming up.
All right, thank you for that, Kaia. So that really brings us to our final question. And some of you have already expressed some of those things in your previous answers, but what were you able to take? What knowledge were you able to take? And what things were you able to apply to your career or to your life that you got from Black Studies? So either specific types of knowledge or other things that you got. And you know, Kaia, you have a particular story because you're in law school, so you have a perspective now that needs to be guided in some form or fashion. So if each of you could kind of answer that question your own way.
If you don't mind saying that last part just one more time of the question.
No, I was just saying, you know, you and I had a conversation about being able to look at law through a Black Studies lens, how it gave you a certain perspective.
Oh, yes.
When you're looking in your approach to law and how you see your career going in law.
Yes, especially constitutional law. I see a lot of parallels, and I always come at it like that, but not even more so the classes, it's more so navigating the environment that Black Studies major really comes in, especially when I tell people this is not right, we need to address this, it's a microaggressive behavior. The ABA hasn't really caught up with the fact that, and you could probably attest to this too, law schools, they don't have a requirement, a diversity requirement. It's not required to be an attorney. You don't have to be culturally aware. You don't have to be diverse. It would be lovely. It would be nice, but that is not a requirement. And so, but when you're around me and you're going to be around young women who look like me, I'm going to set this environment up so much so that you, with your microaggressive behavior, with your privilege, you're not going to push somebody out or make somebody feel uncomfortable because of where they come from or because of the color of their skin. So in saying that, I use the training that I got. I like to call it training because that's really what it's prepped me for. It's made me heightened to things that I had not seen before, to why somebody saying, oh, do you, and I've actually had this question before, do you put Crisco in your hair? Somebody has asked me that question before, or when I go to raise my hand during a lecture, somebody asked me if I was going to hit them. Like, it, obviously those things outwardly are wrong, not only because they're ignorant, but they're wrong because they're coming from a place of just, it's not even ignorance. Ignorance is not the word for it. That would be, that's too base. It's just coming from a place of being culturally unaware. So, and that's what I deal with on a daily basis. But I've learned that there is a way to create that awareness and to cultivate the groups that already exist. I'm a part of the Black Law Student Association, and I know a lot of people in the North. I'm very fortunate to learn a great number of people in the North Omaha community, and I plan on keeping myself accountable and the people that I know accountable, because I want them to tell us where we can go, where we can fit in. I love and kind of low-key envy the fact that UNO Black Studies Department is so present within the community, but you all have established that, whereas Creighton will buy window space and just, you know, like for the Highlander, for instance, but your presence is lacking. The only time I see a Creighton student is when you want to clean something up, because that's all North Omaha is good for, right? Cleaning things up. But we know it's so much more than that. So God blessed it. And I was able to get the law students into the Juneteenth parade. There's about 10 Black students in the, but Black Studies inspired that. It inspired that because Black Studies Department does the Juneteenth parade. And I'm thinking, we're the Black Law Student Association. Why are we not in the Juneteenth parade? Most of the students are transplants, meaning they're not from Omaha, Nebraska. I'll be here for Juneteenth. I'm not gonna miss my Juneteenth. I'm gonna be in the parade. I don't care if it's just me. But see, that's the problem. You know what I mean? That's kind of where that inclusivity piece comes from, because now you have to reach out to other groups who are sensitive to the Black plight, so that you can, you know, kind of cultivate the group and make it grow. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes that's what creates that disconnectivity, and you don't really see the vision of the group of, like, you know, surrounding that aspect of Blackness really coming to fruition. But yeah, no, the department has very much so inspired that for me, that Juneteenth parade and the Omaha Day parade too.
Just to piggyback on that too, as I stated before, you know, coming from Black Studies, it's about once you understand, once you've learned, you're committed for the rest of your life. It's in everything that I do, every job I've ever had. It's about, Felicia, what is your passion? Blackness. It's just very clear. It's who I am, and it's respected. Again, working at ConAgra, I don't see a lot of people that look like me, but the minute the challenge was given to me, we want to increase our internship pool. Okay, I can do it. How many do you need? Not only am I going to find the students, we're going to find excellent students, students of excellence, because we have that here. And sometimes we have to be the voice of, not only the voice of reason, but we have to be the voice of when they're calling for action, when they're calling. ConAgra never participated in Omaha Day Parade, but they did when I came. It's about what are you passionate about? And so I do have to say that the world is reluctant, but then with reluctancy, what did Black Studies teach us? Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to go and say, we want to establish this department for the betterment of everybody. And so I just charge all of our students, our panelists, is that we have to continue fighting. We have to continue demanding and representing, but it's much easier. It doesn't have to be as hard because our ancestors have paved the way for us. It's just now we have to know how to navigate in different revenues or different areas in order to always have our position at a point that they understand this is what we're passionate about. So again, everywhere I've been, Methodist College, we started a committee about inclusiveness here at ConAgra. When I was at UNO, I was the admin representing Black Studies. You know, everywhere. Black Studies was in Omaha Day Parade. Myself and Mona Lisa got with Multicultural Affairs so that every department, that's okay, English, you don't have to participate, but we'll represent for you. So let's get together and be in this fight together. And that's what kind of occurred. So I just challenge everybody to always remember your passion can become your passion can become your presence.
Um, absolutely. Thank everybody for sharing your insights. You know, the many theoretical frameworks, paradigms, epistemologies, ontologies, you know, that's included in BLST, just getting to the academic side. And also sending a shouts out to Dr. Robinson. One thing that in undergrad that stuck out to me was that theoretical framework of cultural contracts theory, where you either buy in, sell out, or at the bottom part, you're going to just rebel against the system. And then most people find that silver lining right there in the middle. So I just remember, I think this had to be 2015, 2016, my first, second year at UNO when I took that class and learned about that. And I just, I don't know, for some reason, I just kind of kept that with me. But cultural contracts theory, and it's just amazing to see it almost 10 years since I learned about it in Dr. Robinson's class. Is just something that I've kept with me, and I always look at that through my lens, and just seeing how so many people go about different things. And yeah, but I mean, just the many frameworks, theories, and you know, yeah, epistemologies and all of that. I mean, I really appreciate that in the world of academia. So that was something that Black Studies was able to provide for me.
I have so many thoughts going through my head about the impact that Black Studies has had on my life, but what I'm going to do is just try to share from a professional standpoint. One of the things that I'm proud of right now, I just attended a luncheon for Black law enforcement executives here in Omaha, and I was proud to see an African-American female that I had mentored while I was at the Omaha Police Department, who was a deputy chief, Black or African-American female who was an acting deputy chief, an African-American male who was an acting captain, and an African-American male who was a lieutenant. I believe it's important to always make sure that you're paving the way for others, because I recognize that I stand on the shoulders of some amazing people who paid the price with blood, sweat, and tears. And even being able to be a member of the police department would not have happened if it was not for the Midwest Guardians filing a lawsuit against the city and the city having to implement a consent decree. And had Senator Chambers and others not worked for district elections in other areas, I don't know that there would have been the opportunity to be able to win a countywide election without people like Brenda Council, Fred Conley, and so many others who represented this community in the legislature or on the city council, county board, Carol Woods Harris, Chris Rogers today, all of those people. So when people see African Americans in leadership, it wasn't a stretch for Brenda Council to almost win a mayor's race. It wasn't a huge stretch then for John Ewing to win the county board race, not because of John Ewing, but because of the foundation and those great people that came before him. So my job becomes to make sure I'm not just the first, but I'm not the last. So I'll just say that I'm working very hard to make sure that we have a second in November of this year, because I believe that's our responsibility to pay it forward.
All right, so I want to thank all of you. This has been just a wonderful conversation. So before we start to wrap up, first I want to say hello. We have another former Office Administrator of Black Studies, Ms. Lois Thomas, is online, so we want to say hello to her. But we want to have our chair, Dr. Robinson, just to give us a few words before we start to wrap it up. So let me bring her on.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh my God, this is like a reunion. Hi, everybody. First, let me say 3 of the 4 of you all were my students. And guess which 3? But this is such a beautiful, just listening, I didn't expect all of this. It is such a beautiful thing, and it's exactly how I feel. Your experiences are my experiences. This is, what you got out of Black Studies, that's what I got out of Black Studies. And that's why I think Black Studies is so important. All of the people who are listening, the administrative assistants, the faculty, the students, people who have experienced Black Studies at UNO for the past umpteen years, thank you. Thank you for everything that we have done to hold that department together and to make sure that university keeps that department a department. And I'm just going to say this too, Miss Felicia Dailey. And if people don't know Felicia and what she was to the department at one of the times of its greatest needs, and I saw that myself. Felicia was that oldest child that was too grown, but when the parents were dysfunctional, Felicia was like, hold up a minute now, I got this, y'all still going to school, held that department together. So I want to say thank you to all of the administrative assistants all the way down today to our current administrative assistant and our graduate student workers and people who have held the department together. Thank you. This has been wonderful.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robinson. There was a question in the Q&A, so we will get to that. Sadly, and I'm just reading the question. Sadly, we have been under attack our entire history in this country, in this hemisphere. Any organization uplifting Black people is under constant attack. Kudos to all of you, so proud and elated that all of you are on a platform like this. Most of our children in OPS in particular are falling behind and are missing out on so much because the mood of the country is multiculturalism and race has been taken out of legislation and affirmative action rules and even civil and voting rights acts. My question is, how can more community engagement happen?
I'm going to keep it short. It can start in the schools. As I said before, when I went to or was in the parade with the Black Studies Department Juneteenth, maybe it was because I was walking, maybe it was because I was walking with the department, but I felt like there was a sense of the kids just seeing these people with these degrees or they're achieving these college goals. And it almost was like they would come up to us, not just because we had candy, because we did have that. Let's just put that out there. But, they were shouting the same things we were. I'm Black and I'm proud. I'm Black and I'm proud. And they wanted to be that. So I feel like it starts in the schools. It starts with letting children know at a very young age that it doesn't matter where somebody comes from, your white counterparts or whoever comes from. You're just as capable, you're just as talented, you're just as anything as them. It doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter that they got 2 parents and you got 1, or you got 2 and they got 1. It doesn't matter. And so just instilling that at a very young age and just promoting that engagement and allowing a pipeline. So I want to be an attorney. So when I went to UNO, there were very little groups that I could just like kind of commune with that would foster me and like lead me on that path. I kind of had to find my own way, or through people who were gracious enough to give me their time, like Professor Terry Crawford or Judge Vaughn or Judge Lowe, and you know, all the Black judges really. But we need to create pipelines. And I believe that that will establish that community engagement. That will allow the high schoolers to be the big brothers and sisters of the middle schoolers, and the middle schoolers to be the big brothers and big sisters of the elementary, and so on and so forth. As these children matriculate, and they'll actually probably get a deeper desire to pursue higher education. I'm not just pursuing a law degree, I'm dual enrolled. I'm getting a master's as well in government organization and leadership. So once I get my JD, I'll also get a master's. So, and Black Studies was a part of that, because I would see them out in the community and fostering that in me. I wanted to obtain as much degrees as I possibly can. Not because it looks good, but because I'm Black and I should have as much as I want, so.
I would say a good way too to contribute with more community is to be involved. We here at Conagra, we were recently involved in a Black professionals event at North High School. It was a great outcome. All of the seniors and juniors came and participated and learned about Conagra, and there was a lot of other organizations in Omaha that participated. But I do want to say one thing I do know, we as Black people, we do so much, but we don't spread what we're doing. We don't advertise what we're doing. Again, I've worked with Mr. Ewing, I've worked with Cynthia in all different capacities, from coming to our scholarship banquet and giving a keynote. So one thing that I do encourage us to do is share all that we're doing, because the Black community is doing a lot in Omaha. It's kind of a secret, you know, and once you get tapped into the right individual, as you said, Ms. Phelps, when you build those relationships, then you get a flourish of support. But how do we know we can be supported if we don't reach out to different organizations and know that they're there for us? Because again, as Black people, once we know you, we're going to grab you, baby, and hold you and make sure that you're successful. That's what we do. You know, Mr. Ewing said he doesn't want to be the first. He just wants to be the person that continues it. So a lot of the things that we do in silo. And I just encourage us to share those resources that we have within our fingertips so that we can become more involved. I think that's one of the biggest things that I take away is you talk to somebody, oh, I gave away 50 coats. To who? Oh, my school needed it and I gave them 50 coats. Oh, okay. So we just do that, but we have to share it more.
Yeah, I'll just some basics as far as organization and engagement. To just share a few good strategies. It just starts off with building and implementing a strategy, that building piece, and then implementing your strategy. Having the right people around you, so pivotal, right? And if you have the right people around you, you have to keep them around you. You reward people, invest in them, empower the people that are around you, promote diversity within your organization as far as engaging into the community. So just a few strategies that come off the top of my head um, as far as engagement and organizing.
A thought I have is simply this: there are opportunities to always encourage. There are opportunities to always support. There are opportunities to always mentor. There are opportunities to always encourage. I have no problem letting people know I'm a strong Black man who is committed to serving this community, but in particular, African-American organizations, so that our young people have the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. That's my goal. I'll go in any school and speak to young people. I'll do any program that I can do, because I'm looking to encourage people and make sure they have the same opportunities I had because of the people who came before me.
As someone who is still in school, I love hearing about this. So y'all know I'm a part of an organization now. So if y'all got something that y'all know that is in the community and you need help with college students and graduates, this is the perfect platform to do it. Since we're talking about getting to know each other and making sure that we keep each other accountable, Creighton needs to be kept accountable because they need to be in this community. They're in North Omaha. A lot of white students, they think that, oh, they're in downtown Omaha. You're not in downtown Omaha. You're in North Omaha. That's where you are. Understand it, know it, accept it. That's where you are. And so they need to be engaged with the community, and they need to make sure that they're living up to their own Jesuit values. And I'm going to make sure that they do that. So if there's ever an opportunity where you would like to come and speak, Mr. Ewing, or anybody on this panel, I like what everybody had to say. I know that I want the same, what the Black Studies Department has going on at UNO, I want the same thing for my institution. That's how we build community. We don't keep the gems that we learn from Black Studies there. We keep it, we spread it. It's gonna permeate. It needs to permeate. So yes, I don't like that narrative. I don't like that notion that Creighton is in the quote unquote best spot. And it's the best spot because it's my community, but they're totally unaware that they're making Creighton synonymous with like a rich neighborhood. It's not, no, you're in North Omaha. Understand it, know it. So yes, we're not stopping. It's all gas from here. There you go, Mr. Stanley. I see you all up in this chat. And I thank you so much for listening. Anybody in the chat, I'll watch the chat. If you have anything going on in the community where you want to see students engaged, keep us accountable. Because we low-key got money too that we can help fundraise. Ooh, did I say that? I sure did.
And I will say, Kaia, that throughout this webinar series, we've had several students from Creighton to participate. So they were registering and attending these webinars. So they're not all totally oblivious to what's going on UNO Black Studies. Some of them are keyed in and listening in. So having said that, again, I want to thank you all because we've reached our time, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. But I want to thank all of our panelists, Mrs. Dailey, Mr. Ewing, Ms. Phelps, Mr. Stelly, for sharing your time with us. This has been just phenomenal. But I know that when the students and even some alum watch this later on YouTube, you know, they will be intrigued by what you said, and you will draw people back to, you know, those who have graduated in Black Studies will be like, hey, I should reconnect and see what's going on. And students who are, you know, maybe just considering what they should be doing, they'll listen and say, hey, maybe I should stop on by the Black Studies Department. And actually, we saw some students going through the building earlier today, and I came in and I mentioned it to one of our undergraduate students, Danielle Price, and she said, you think I should go and grab them? She did. She stopped them outside, and they had 3 different tours coming through, and they brought 50 people per tour. And she actually hijacked them, and they ended up coming into the Black Studies Department. They never would have stopped before because they were just going down the hallway, going straight on out the door. So we need to build these connections, and that's another way to do that. So I want to say thank you. This is our next to last webinar. We've been doing this all year long, so we have one more left. So I want to share what we'll be doing on Thursday. So on Thursday, we will have the Black Studies Chairs Roundtable. So we will have a group of faculty members, some of them former chairs, in conversation with our chair, Dr. Robinson, about the historical challenges of Black Studies and strategies for building or charting future directions for Black Studies departments. And then on Friday, for those of you who are in town, we have a treat, the Music of the Revolution. So stay tuned for that. But thank you again. We want to thank Chris Library, our Archives and Special Collections, our partner in this whole initiative, Miss Amy Schindler, who is in the chat. Make sure you go in and she has a, let's see, where is it? There, she's putting in all kinds of links in the chat, but she wants you to go and complete a little short survey, so make sure you do that. But we want to thank Amy and Claire Delaney in Special Collections for all of the work that they have done in helping us with all of this throughout the year. And we want to thank our audience. Some of you have been here multiple times. I see names that are familiar. So you've logged in week after week to be here live, to ask questions and to just be here to support us. And we really thank you for that. So you don't get to be 50 years old in a department like this, excuse me, without support from the community.